AM1450, FM 1033 KNSI. Good afternoon, KNSI News Time 408. It's Ox in the afternoon. Steve Gottwald sitting in for Dan the Oxner this afternoon. And with us live in studio, our very own State Representative Jim Knoblach, representative from District 14B in St. Cloud and Haven Township, that area of our community, and also the chair of the very powerful House Ways and Means Committee, and kind of at the epicenter of activity in the House of Representatives and in the legislature. And it was a crazy, wild finish, and there was some stuff left undone, but a lot got done too when you cut through all of the media crap.
Well, the things I was heavily involved with got done. I mean, we had what they call the supplemental finance bill, which is 8 different bills kind of rolled into one. K-12 education, higher education, economic development, agriculture, environment, health and human services, public safety, other state government finance. That was just a massive negotiation with the Senate that went on for a couple of weeks. But in the end, we got that bill done, which I co-chaired that committee with another person. There were a lot of great things in that bill. I think one thing that a lot of people will appreciate is there will actually be a exemption from state income tax now on all veterans' benefits. That was in that bill. That's something
Excellent.
We've been working with for a long time, and so really pleased to see that. There was some additional funding for District 742 as well, an increase in funding for services of the blind and disabled that I offered, and some other good tax items that also passed this year. For people who are small business owners who, say, own a small building, there's a $100,000 exclusion now, where the first $100,000 of value you won't pay your state tax on. If you buy a manufactured home, you won't pay sales tax on that anymore. So there were a lot of good things that happened. But unfortunately, the transportation and bonding bill, which is something I wasn't heavily involved in this year because I was doing this other bill, that was not a good ending.
And by the way, on that big bill you just mentioned, a lot of Democrat votes. This was not something that was partisan at all. You got a lot of Democrats voting for it.
Yeah, no, we had a slightly more Democrats voted for it than against it. And, of course, the great majority of Republicans voted for it. So, yeah, it passed. I think it was like 95 to 39. I mean, overwhelming passage.
Wow. Well, nice work on that. Because, as I pointed out, I've pointed this out many times, people read the headlines and they think nothing got done, and, boy, legislators don't get it. A lot got done, really, but these two big pieces at the end, as we pointed out just before you joined us, last half hour I mentioned, this they threw a poison pill in right at the very end, literally at the last minute, and that resulted in closing down the legislature without getting these two bills. And now there's at least a chance that something will come of that. Well, will the governor call a special session?
It's hard to say. I guess my suspicion is the governor will eventually call a special session. I mean, but it's hard to say. I mean, who can tell with him? On the transportation side, people should remember, too, that the state operates on a 2-year budget cycle. We passed the biggest transportation funding bill we've ever passed last year for these 2 years. So it's not like there's going to be no money spent on transportation.
Yeah, suddenly all the plows and the backhoes and the workers are all going to be idled because you didn't pass this bill right now. There's plenty of money in the pipeline.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who's driving around can see all the orange cones and know there's stuff going on. And money will continue to be spent, but the extra money beyond what we passed last year, that is what did not happen. And so that was a disappointment. But it's a hard bill to pass. The Democrats controlled the House, the Senate, and the governorship in 2013 to 14. They tried to pass a transportation bill, and even with it all underneath one party, they still couldn't. And part of the reason for that is there's so much more to this than just the partisanship. You've got the, St. Paul and Minneapolis people are kind of against the suburban people. You've got a rift between the greater Minnesota people and the metro people. You got a big rift between the people that believe in building roads and bridges and the people that want transit. You even got a rift between the asphalt people and the concrete people. I mean, there's all these sort of different divisions down there that somehow have to be bridged to get a transportation bill done.
Yeah, the bigger the bill, the more the interests, and the more the wrestling match over it, obviously. AM 1450, FM 1033, KNSI, KNSI News Time 413. In studio with us live, Representative Jim Knoblach, our own representative from District 14B here in the St. Cloud area, and the chair of the powerful House Ways and Means Committee. And now joining us live on Ox in the Afternoon, the Speaker of the House, Representative Kurt Daudt. Representative Daudt, thanks for joining us.
Steve, can I have you make sure that Jim has his headphones on so he can hear as well?
There you go. Yeah, you'll need to put on your headphones, Jim, right here, just so you can hear what Speaker Daudt is saying.
All right.
There we go. Speaker Daudt, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having me on.
Are you caught up on sleep at all?
Sort of. I probably got more sleep last night than I did in the previous 4 or 5 nights combined. So, and I think Jim was probably in that same situation. I want to tell you what a great job and what a great, really what a great job and what a great leader Jim was during the last few days of the session. As the Ways and Means Chair, he was kind of the lead on all of the negotiations on all the fiscal issues and really did a phenomenal job.
Well, I've always said he's forgotten more than I'll ever know, and he does both our district and the state of Minnesota proud.
Well, I couldn't have done any of what I did without him, and he just really did a great job. He's super knowledgeable on a wide-ranging area of issues and understands the state budget probably like no one else.
Well, and despite the messy end of the session, the truth of the matter is when you dig in and you look at what the body of work of the legislature is for this session, you did a tremendous job leading too, as well, Mr. Speaker. And you know, despite the drive-by media saying, the legislature screwed up again, big meltdown, blah, 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 you had the major pieces negotiated and ready to complete, and the House, in fact, did complete those pieces on time. And it was a screw-up on the Senate side, frankly.
We did, and we had, the one underlying good part of the deadline at the end of session, and the process part becomes ugly with the deadline, but that deadline forces people to come together and compromise. And that bill that we put on the floor the last night of session, between bonding and transportation, this was just an unbelievably good infrastructure bill. It would have put $700 million into roads and bridges. But as you were talking about, just as I called in, this passed the House with a veto-proof majority. It was so bipartisan. A majority of the Democrats voted for it. I mean, that's a testament to what a great bill it was. And I had Democrat members of the legislature come up to me after, when it had failed in the Senate, and say, "Oh my gosh, this was the best bonding bill ever," and it really was. It didn't have the frilly kind of wasteful spending stuff in it. It was all infrastructure. It was taking care of our heaper at the Minskew in St. Cloud there. I mean, it was road and bridge projects that it had $60 million for Highway 23 west of St. Cloud. Just projects that people have talked about for years. And this bill, I'm still hopeful we can get it passed. I think as people realize the kinds of projects that were in this bill and the size of the influx of money this would have put into our road and bridge infrastructure, there's going to be a lot of pressure on the governor to call a special session to get this thing passed.
What is the prospect for that, Speaker Daudt, at this point? I mean, we know Governor Dayton likes to step up to the microphone and cameras and kind of bluster and blame, and then after he sits down and thinks about it for a while, he sometimes comes back with a more reasoned response. Is that going to happen here?
Well, he was on the radio yesterday in the morning stating that he thought this was a great bill, that the projects that it was going to be funding were really good projects. So I'm hopeful. And this is not a partisan bill in any way, shape, or form. It was a true compromise that came out. Obviously, it's not a long-term funding plan, but this puts more money into roads and bridges than even the long-term plan would have, at least up front. So I'm hopeful that the governor will call a special session. We can do this. I spoke with him yesterday morning at about 10 o'clock and urged him to that we could start meeting and call a special session fairly quickly. I think he wants to wait a little bit. I don't want to put words in his mouth here, but I think what he's up to is kind of waiting a little bit to process the bills that we have sent him, and then kind of analyze the bill that we passed in the House on the last night of session, just to determine what his opinion of is that bill and the projects that are in it. So.
Well, and he's got to be hearing from a lot of Democrats, I would think, too. Those Democrats you mentioned who said this is a great bill. It's got stuff in it for my district or for the state of Minnesota that's very important. And he's got to be hearing from them that they need to get these things done, the transportation and the bonding bill.
Well, my guess is that he is hearing from those members, and I just can't talk enough about the importance of the projects that are in the bill. It really is. I mean, if you were going to write a bonding bill, I would call it maybe a Republican bonding bill. This one is really, it meets what I said early on. And I said, I don't care so much about the amount of the bill, but I want to put together a bill that really every member of the legislature should want to vote for. And I think we accomplished that. It's not only bonding, but it had $300 million of cash. So we took 1/3 of the surplus and we put it in the bill in cash for only roads and bridges. So that was the kind of commitment that we had to fixing that road and bridge infrastructure. And that was as a result of hearing what people out in Minnesota wanted. We were responding to what Minnesotans want.
Yeah, I mean, the alternative was raising the wholesale cost of gas, which every time the cost of gas goes up, it's another big windfall for the state and more money out of our back pockets.
Well, that's just it. And the governor had kind of doubled down on the need of a gas tax to improve our roads and bridges. But it's a very tough sell to Minnesotans, particularly out in greater Minnesota where they tend to drive more miles and they maybe don't have the same level of income as you would in the metro or suburban areas. It's a tough sell to say to those people, we need you to pay more to pay for something that's a core function of state government, and at a time when we have a $900 million surplus. How do you say to people, you need to give government more money when we already have too much? And we have more than enough resources to pay for our road and bridge infrastructure. We just have to put our mind to it and do what Minnesotans want us to do. And that's what we tried to do in this bill. And I think it was successful. Unfortunately, it got held up in the Senate because they tried to put a controversial provision in at the last minute. And then I think they realized what they had done. They tried to pull it out, but ran out of time. So they got a little too cute by half. And unfortunately, $700 million of road and bridge money was lost or potentially lost because they tried to put in some language about Southwest Light Rail.
AM1450, FM 1033 KNSI. We have the Speaker of the Minnesota House, Kurt Daudt, on with us live on the phone, and in studio with us, the Chair of the House Ways and Means Committee and our very own local state representative, Jim Knoblach. And so, Jim, what is the process? So if the governor calls the special session, do these bills have to go back through the Ways and Means Committee, or how does that work?
Well, it really depends on how much of an agreement there all is. If you don't have agreement from the minority, they can stymie the process and make you go through all the committees and have you there a number of days. But typically what happens in a deal like this is everything's negotiated. You go in, you suspend the rules, you do it all in one day. And I would predict that if we have a special session, that's what will happen.
Very good. So, Speaker Daudt, are there plans to meet with the governor at this point, or are we just kind of letting this cool for a while before he calls you or you call him, or how's that working out?
Well, as I said, I called him yesterday at about 10 o'clock on his cell phone. We spoke for 10 or 15 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. I indicated to him that I thought we should begin those conversations right away and that a special session sooner than later would be better, and I think it really would be. He did a press conference. He said he would kind of look into it and think about it. He did a press conference in the afternoon indicating that there would not be a special session or even conversations within the first 48 hours. So at this point, I have no indication of when we'll actually be meeting to start those conversations, but still hopeful that it's soon.
Just kind of a cooling off period, at least from his perspective.
Well, and I don't know exactly what he's thinking. Now, remember that we sent him the tax bill and the supplemental spending bill. I have to sign them before they go to his desk. Once they pass the House, I have to sign, the President of the Senate signs, and then they go to the governor. But I signed a stack of bills 2 days ago that was I signed them yesterday. There was probably 20 of them. So he's going to probably take some time and go through those bills and look at what's in them and make decisions about whether he's signing those. I assume, and I think he will sign all of those bills, including the supplemental budget bill and the tax bill. And I'm looking forward to him doing that. So I think once he's done with that, then he'll kind of think about the bonding bill. And I'm sure he's spending some time kind of reading what was in it and before he makes a decision whether he'll support that or what demands on top of that he might have.
Sure. And to your point, I mean, there's all these bills that were passed. So to those who think that the legislature didn't get anything done and didn't finish their business, an awful lot of really good work that got done, that was signed by both the House and the Senate, that was passed on bipartisan votes, and now is sitting waiting for the governor's review and hopeful signature.
Yeah, and I think the minority right now, Paul Thiessen is trying to create a narrative that we didn't get our work done and that there was meltdown at the end. These are process arguments for people that want to convince you that the majority is not getting their work done. If you look at the actual content and the issues that were covered in these bills,
the results,
that controversial bill on the last night of session had a veto-proof majority of votes. Now that's true compromise, and that's a bill that kind of contradicts his narrative that we weren't working together. So I ask people, don't get so wrapped up in the process. Look at the actual results of what was accomplished. And now I wish I could say that bill is going to become law, but the Senate played some games with it, so it's up in the air.
Well, of course, Paul Thiessen isn't exactly a great example when you look at how things ended when he was Speaker either. But, what was interesting is I think the Senate, I don't know what the problem is over there, but they just, the last few years, they just have gotten too cute at the end because they kind of goofed things up last year, too. I can't remember what bill it was, but they picked the wrong bill to pass to try to send it over to us. And so we didn't get all the bills done that we should have done last year because they didn't pick the bill that we needed to still pass to bring it up in time.
Right. Rather than take up a spending bill right at the end that was part of the state's budget, they took up a bonding bill that nobody had seen at all. They created it themselves and sent it over to us, and it included something so controversial as an underground parking ramp next to the Capitol for the governor and for Senator Bach and potentially other lead. I mean, it had 22 spots in it for $7 million. Well, that was the sort of thing they tried to slip through without anybody knowing. Well, we didn't even. I saw the bill. We didn't even take it up.
Well, we couldn't take it up, as I remember, because I don't think we got it until 2 or 3 minutes after midnight. And so even if we had passed it instantaneously, it still wouldn't have been legal.
I mean, these are the things most people don't hear about, and that really do kind of muck things up at the end. It wasn't a lack of leadership; it was monkey business at the 11th hour. We have to take a quick break. Speaker Daudt and Representative Jim Knoblach, who's with us as well. If you guys can stick around for just a few minutes, we're going to take a quick break on Ox in the Afternoon, AM 1450, FM 1033, KNSI.